Hi there. For those of you that know me, hey guys. And those of you that don't, my name is Autumn and I'm the Business Development Manager for the Orlando, Jacksonville area. If you're not familiar with Castle, we are a professional property management company serving properties with full-time on-site management. We have over 2,700 employees and 500 associations. What makes Castle unique is our royal service. Putting the customer first with our best people, best systems, and best technology, we're able to deliver the best service to our communities. If you'd like to know more about Castle, my contact information will be listed at the end of the presentation. And now, without any further ado, Deanna, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Autumn, for the introduction, and thank you, Castle Group, for inviting me to speak to these attendees on the webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deanna Sada. I am one of the lawyers at the Berg Simpson Law Firm. Our law firm is in multiple states, but I run the Florida division. And in the Florida division, we focus exclusively on construction defect litigation. So as you can appreciate, we're busy because unfortunately, there are wonderful and beautiful buildings and townhomes in our state, but some of them have had the misfortune of shoddy construction. And so when that happens, they hire our law firm to represent boards and associations like yours. We work alongside management companies like Castle Group to help the board and the association become whole again when they essentially become victims of shoddy construction. So that's what I do for a living. But what I love to do, in addition to lawyering, is actually teach. I'm a teacher at heart, and I travel around the state to teach. What do I teach? Not only construction defect litigation. I'm very passionate about that topic and speak about it regularly, but I typically teach things like this: building boards that work. How can we communicate better? How can we change the things that may be micro and within our control in our boards and associations that end up having a domino effect that makes life easier for everyone, for the members, for the association. It protects board members and management companies alike. I love teaching these things because, as you can appreciate, being a construction defect lawyer means I am standing in front of boards, talking to them about, if not one of, probably the single hardest thing that they have to face. Most construction defect lawsuits are in the millions of dollars. I'm talking anywhere, between $1 million or $2 to $100, maybe even $200 million of repair and damages to certain buildings. And when I am talking to boards about these types of big issues, they have to make really big decisions. They're not a decision about, should we paint, right? When that happens, there's a lot of conflict because big decisions are not taken very lightly. And because I happen to be an attorney that is addressing boards 100% of the time regarding one of the biggest decisions and processes they have to go through, I've seen a lot of conflict. I've seen a lot of tension. And I have inferred and studied how to build boards that work better from the ground up, aside from construction defect litigation. I'm simply giving you that background to let you know how and why I am able to talk about building boards that work. And so I also have psychology in my background, and I love human perception, which means I started to dig in. I started to study, what is it that makes boards dysfunctional? And why are they that way? And how can we fix it? That's what we're going to focus on today. And I think every single attendee here, whether you're a board member or a property manager, you're going to take something away from today, whether it's a small tip or a big picture, aha moment that you've had about your role as a board member or manager. I know you'll take something away from today. So, Autumn, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to stop the screen share because I don't quite have the typical lawyer PowerPoint that everybody is used to. I know that you're probably disappointed because you would probably rather stop listening and get the PowerPoint, but that's why I don't like to use PowerPoints. I think it's much more important that we make this a dialogue. I know this is webinar style, but if you would just hear me out, we're going to talk about only 3 big overarching issues when it comes to board problems and how to solve them. So we don't need a PowerPoint for that. We're going to have a great conversation together. You can respond to your screen if you'd like. It'll make me feel better knowing that all of you are responding to your screen, even though I can't not hear you, okay? And yes, I did put my hand up. If you see a massive thumb, I'm sorry, I injured myself. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, so with that background, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about 3 overarching reasons why boards inherently, when they start out, I know this might be offensive to board members, but hear me out. I promise I have a point. Why they inherently and presumptively start out in debt. Why they inherently and presumptively do not work. We're going to talk about 3 reasons why that is, and then we're going to offer a solution for each of those reasons. I always say lawyers love to pick problems, but they never provide solutions. So I promise you, I'm actually going to give you some solutions, okay? The number 1 reason, and this is something most people haven't really thought about, the number 1 reason why boards start out in debt, unlike other companies, is because board members have oftentimes, not all the time, okay, have nothing in common aside from the fact that they live in the same community. However, they are now running a company together. This is something from a legal standpoint I always stress to people, and most people don't fully understand. If you're a board member, you are running a company. Just because it's a nonprofit company doesn't mean it's not a company. You're running a company. And if you wear that hat of a director of a company, you'll actually perform your job significantly better and more efficiently, because you will realize this is business. I'm running a company hat. And when I do that, I won't take things personally as much. I won't represent this clique versus that clique in a building. I won't be as emotional about the fact that this is my home, right? Because that's the problem too, is a lot of times people get pressure that this is our home, this is our biggest purchase. How could you not increase security? How could you not want to paint? How could you not enforce quiet hours starting at 6 p.m. or whatever it may be? When you put on the hat of I am running a company, you will remove that emotion from it and continue to remind yourself you are a director of a company. But again, let's go back to that problem number 1. Considering that we are running a company as board members, but we come from such different walks of life, with the only common denominator that we start out with being that we live in the same community, we're obviously starting out in debt. Let me prove it to you this way. If any of you here in your jobs or in your lives have had hiring and firing authority, let's say you're running an accounting firm, okay? And you get a resume, you get several resumes. You have an opening for an accountant, you get several resumes. The first thing you're going to look at is, are they qualified? Do they have the degree that they need to have, right? You're going to look at all of that stuff. Great. Do they have experience? Yes, sure, maybe, maybe not, whatever. You're going to throw out some resumes. You know, if you get like a nursing student who wants to be your accountant, you're probably just going to be like, yeah, she seems nice, but that doesn't work. You'll throw out that resume, right? And then after you whittle it down to 3 or 4 resumes, you might interview those people. And then what are you looking for? You're looking for communication skills, maybe charisma, and most importantly, you're looking for whether that person fits in the culture of your company, right? You might have values. And so does this person fit in the culture? Do you, as a boss, think that this person is going to get along with everybody else that works for you? Where am I getting at with this? In a regular company, unlike an association, also a company, you have the privilege of vetting people. Are they qualified? Can they serve on this role? Can they get along with everybody else on the board or in my company? Whereas in associations, because it is a thankless job, because it is a volunteering position, a lot of people just don't have the time, the ability, the capacity to do it. And so I cannot tell you how many of our clients say to us, hey, we had a board member drop out, but nobody wants to fill that seat. And so when somebody wants to fill that seat, they get on the board by virtue of having a pulse. And what does that mean? That means you didn't get the opportunity to vet 10 applications and say, well, you're not very qualified. I'd rather have you. You're not very experienced. I'd rather have you. You don't fit within the rest of the board members. You don't fit our culture. I'd rather have you. You don't have that privilege in associations. You often have to accept people on the board because nobody ran against them. They got a seat on the board. And now all of a sudden you have 4 or 5 members on the board that are comprised of maybe the millennial who wants to text about everything, maybe the old school person who doesn't even have an email address and wants everything to be met in person. And you're expecting these 5 boards of directors to run a company. Not only that, you're expecting them to uphold a very heightened legal duty called a fiduciary duty and actually execute their role in the best interest of the association when all of their other board members come from different walks of life and have nothing in common with them. Sometimes, look, I understand there are exceptions to all the rules, and so sometimes there may be commonalities among board members, but oftentimes there aren't. And then you don't have continuity. Board members resign all the time. It's much more of a revolving door than a regular company's board of directors when everybody's trying to get to that seat, so much so that they'll never get out of that seat unless they have to, right? So when you have lack of continuity, people coming from different walks of life, sometimes people making it to be in the C-suite of a company, I cannot emphasize that enough, without even being qualified, then naturally your boards are going to start out in debt. And so when they start out in debt and they continue building on these types of dysfunctions, what do you have? You might have serious tension on your board. And so where we're going to go today is we're going to, I told you we're going to talk about 3 problems. One of them is that boards start out in debt. We're going to talk about the other 2 problems as well, but I like to do a solution in between each problem, and then we'll do the overarching solution in the end. The solution to this problem that boards naturally start out in debt because you don't have the luxury of vetting is actually pretty simple. And oftentimes when I do this presentation and I say it, people are like, come on, that's not really a tangible solution. But it is. The solution is recognize this problem, acknowledge this problem. And when you do that, you are significantly less likely as a board member to be mad at your fellow board member when they say something that doesn't fit in your mind or that doesn't make sense in your mind. Here's why this is an actual solution. Because most people, when they're sitting together in a room with other boards of directors, they hold themselves to a higher standard. And then when someone says something ridiculous, like, hey, let's paint the building neon green, then you might be like, oh my gosh, this person is an idiot. I can't believe they keep suggesting these terrible things. They don't care about being on the board. They don't whatever. Maybe if you were in a company where everyone was vetted for qualification, experience, and all of that stuff, maybe you can think that. Because how can our colleague who earned their spot here because of a lot of experience suggest something that ludicrous? Then you can maybe judge a little. But here, if you recognize that you don't have the luxury to vet people that make it on the board, I'm not saying lower your standards in what you expect of human beings. And I am in no way implying that some board members are not intelligent. That's not what I mean. What I mean is people, the vast differences between or among the board members are much broader. The differences are much bigger than if you were in a company where everybody was vetted. And so when somebody says something that you don't agree with, you need to just recognize it's okay. We all come from different walks of life. This was not a scenario where we were all qualified or interviewed by someone that makes it more likely that we think similarly. When you accept that as a human being, you become more empathetic, more sympathetic, less likely to take things personally. I can't tell you how many board members I have seen tell me something like, well, Linda always disagrees with me. Anything I say, she always says no to. She's got something against me. And I'm like, no, maybe what you fail to recognize is that, Linda has this personality characteristic of being a naysayer. She is very reserved, and everything she says, she says no to at first. It's like my mother, exactly. If I ask her, Mom, would you like for me to hand you the winning lottery ticket? I think her initial reflex is going to be no, because she is a naysayer. And so when we are in a regular company, we get to know each other, right? Because our bosses may throw happy hours, they may throw retreats for us to get to know one another. And when we get to know one another, we can say, oh, yeah, Linda is just the person, it's her type that she just tends to say no to things. But let's go to associations. Board members often don't hang out with each other at all. They don't get to know each other at all. Partly because they're terrified of the sunshine laws, right? Oh my gosh, we don't want to create a majority. You can absolutely create a majority if you're not talking about association business. If you're just trying to get to know each other as human beings so you can serve your community better, you can absolutely get to know each other, talk about basketball, talk about your kids. I understand that sometimes if the entire board is, standing in the corner, then it might look like it's a meeting. And so I'm not saying go out of your way to make it look like your meeting. But if you meet another board member while you're walking your dog, please stop and get to know each other. That is another way to resolve problem number one. Recognize that we come from different walks of life so that you don't take things personally, you judge each other less, and get to know each other. If you get to know each other, you might know that this person is going through a divorce. And so the next time there's a board meeting and that person says, oh my gosh, Bill, no, we talked about this before. What is wrong with you? And if you know that person's going through a divorce, you might not be like, oh, person's so rude, they're so rude to me all the time. Instead, you might be like, all right, I know we talked about this before, but I'm just bringing it up again. And you might just have a little more empathy. All of a sudden, this understanding and camaraderie that you've built among the board members, because you are now recognizing that you're running a company and you should mirror what regular companies do as best as possible, will just naturally make make you all more synchronized and work better together. So that is the overarching problem number one. And a very simple solution to kind of get past that is recognize that this is a problem and get to know each other. It's not a big deal. Get to know each other. Now, problem number two is a little bit more is something we can actually apply on a day-to-day basis in our boards, okay? And that is that board members lack the ability to engage in healthy conflict. I'm going to say that one more time. So problem number two is that board members lack the ability to engage in healthy conflict. Notice I said healthy, not just conflict. Everyone knows how to engage in conflict. We know what happens in board meetings sometimes. It's never-ending conflict. There's plenty of it, okay? And sometimes when I talk about this problem, I always get hands raised that are like, isn't that a good thing that we don't want to engage in conflict? No, it's not. We want you to engage in healthy conflict. We just don't want you to engage in unnecessary conflict. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that Autumn and I are on the board together. And Autumn, of course, you're going to be my victim. I'm going to pick on you because you're the only person I can see.
I figured.
So let's say you and I are on the board together. And let's just say for a moment that that we have a third person with us, and we'll call him Bill, okay? And let's say I happen to be the type of person that doesn't take break between my words. I love to hear myself talk. I'm very vocal. It's my way or the highway. We all know that on every board, there's a person who happens to be more of the vocal person, and then there's a person who just doesn't want to engage in conflict, right? And let's say for a moment that you are that person. You are the person who just does not feel like engaging in any back and forth. Let's say your personality characteristic is that you're just a lot more quiet and you're typically a follower. Okay, it doesn't mean you're not incredibly intelligent and have wonderful opinions, but your reflex is not to be like, wait a minute, I disagree. It's really to just be like, I just don't, I don't want to engage. Okay, I don't want to engage. So, and then we have Bill with us, and let's say we are a 3-person board. If I am extremely vocal and I love to hear myself talk and it's my way or the highway, and I'm that, that leader, whether it's a good way or a bad way, that just really, really wants to make my point be the winning point. What is your vote likely to be most of the time?
Whatever your vote is.
Right. Whatever my vote is. So if we're a 3-person board, we just got reduced to a 2-person board. And now it is a fight between me and Bill. It's a fight about who's louder and who's more powerful. And it's no longer checks and balances. And it's not because you're not incredible. It's because you happen to be the type that doesn't want to engage in healthy conflict. And all of a sudden your vote is mine. I just doubled my power. And that's just not doubled. We're 1/3 higher. But that's not a very good thing. And we all know here that happens on boards. So how do we rectify that? There are so many ways that are past a 1-hour-long webinar that we can talk about instilling healthy deliberations and conflicts among teammates. And in fact, I urge each and every single one of you here to really Google some articles about promoting healthy conflict among teammates. There are so many ideas. But because we have an hour to talk about 3 big things, I'm going to give you one solution. I promise you, many boards that I have talked to about this have used this solution, and they have written me emails, they have called after, and they have said things like, this solution made our board meetings, our community significantly better. How do we rectify this? For every decision we make, we deploy what I like to call the circle of pros and cons. Okay, the circle of pros and cons. How does it work? Let's hypothetically say, Autumn, that in our community, you and I are both on the board and Bill is with us. In fact, I should probably make Bill the silent person because he's the hypothetical person that doesn't exist, right? So why don't we do that? You're no longer the silent person. It's Bill who doesn't want to engage in conflict because he's hypothetical and doesn't exist. You're a person that's kind of neutral. You'll give and take, but not necessarily as vocal as I am. Okay, that's how you are in the hypothetical. Are you good with that? Okay. So here's how the circle of pros and cons works. Whenever you, as members of a board, need to make a decision, you can deliberate as much as you want. Oftentimes, a lot of my managers say that they recommend planning meetings to their boards, and boards end up loving planning meetings. So let's say your association does do planning meetings. In your planning meeting, you can deliberate as much as you want. In that meeting, chances are Bill is still going to be relatively quiet, and Autumn's going to be somewhat neutral, and I am probably going to speak 90% of the time. But the reality is, you cannot completely change people's characteristics. You can just instill processes to control them. And that's the circle of pros and cons that I'm getting to. So let's say in the planning meeting, you are deliberating and you go back and forth and all that great stuff. You have a great manager who has bids for you and whatever decision that you want to make. And let's say the decision in front of you is, there was a robbery in your community recently, and you need to decide whether you want to build a fence. The fence is $200,000. Let's say your community doesn't quite have the money, but you're able to get a loan. And let's just say that robbery was an isolated incident, but you're getting a lot of pressure from homeowners that, hey, you're on the board, do something about it. We've got a problem here. Let's say those are the hypothetical facts, okay, that we're going to play with. So Autumn, you and I and Bill are going to be going back and forth like, well, should we really do a whole fence for increased security? It really was just the one time. And then somebody says, yeah, we should, because it was a big robbery. There's a lot of pressure from the community. And then we go back and forth about, well, what if we do cameras first? Maybe that'll deter someone. And then we talk about, well, we are not only installing a fence here for $200,000, we now have increased maintenance costs, So we talk about all of those things, okay? Let's say we deliberate about all of those things. Chances are, remember, our problem that we're talking about now is a lack of healthy conflict. Chances are, when you and I, and let's say we have, I don't know if it's a 5-person board or whatever, when we're all deliberating, everybody's throwing out all these different things. But chances are Bill is not exactly throwing out as much, right? He's probably nodding. I'm probably going to have his vote because I like to hear myself speak. And he doesn't get to be heard. He doesn't get to engage in healthy conflict because of people like me. So the pro and con circle goes like this. It is, if your board agrees to using it, that means before every decision is made, regardless of whether you've made up your mind on your own vote, we have to go around in a circle as board members, and each member has to say one pro and one con about this decision. That's the pro and con circle, is that we have to go around as board members, and each member has to say one pro and one con about this decision. What does that do? The indirect effects of this are incredible. Here's what that does. 1, Bill now must speak. He now has a seat at the table. He has to say his opinion. 2, it controls people like me. I must only provide one pro and one con. I can't go on and on and on and on. We decided as a board that we want to instill this process of the pros and cons circle to respect each other. 3, it promotes it shows to the community a respectful process, a respectful board meeting. This way, even if, let's say, you and I, Autumn, represent maybe a couple of different groups in the community, if I say my pro is this and my con is this, and then you go next and you say, I disagree, my pro is this and my con is this. Let's say it's completely different than and then we continue. It still shows the members of the community that we are 3 people or 5 people or however many people that are running a company, but doing so with professionalism, class, and integrity, as opposed to me being like, I didn't finish. Okay, let me finish, right? because we agreed to this process. And the most incredible indirect effect of the pros and cons circle is something most people don't think about. And that is this. You're obviously doing this in front of your community. Oftentimes, how many times have my board members here decided on something, and then you thought about all sorts of things that affect your decision, but then you hear from the community later, well, I'm sure they didn't even think about the fact that X, Y, and Z. And you're like, we totally did. We thought about that. But the community isn't paying attention most of the time to every word that's coming out of your mouth because they're not coming to all the meetings. So if you do the pros and cons circle, and let's say you're a 5-person board, quickly, within 3 minutes, you just summarized. You're summarizing. This is not your deliberation, remember. You just summarized 10 different considerations, right? 5 pros and 5 cons if you're a 5-person board. What does that mean? You just summarized 10 different considerations. And so let's play with it for a second, Autumn, if you'll humor me, okay? We are doing the fence. Okay, remember, it's $200,000. It's very expensive. We don't quite have enough money for it. Maybe we can get a loan out. It's an isolated decision, robbery, but we're getting a lot of pressure from the community, okay? So let's say it's my turn. And we, by the way, guys, part of the pros and cons circle is you should encourage each other not to repeat a pro and a con, okay? So I'll go first. Let's say we're doing the pros and cons. We've already deliberated. My mind's already made up. But because we want to engage in healthy conflict and we want to promote healthy conflict, we need to give each other the mic so that the person like Bill gets enough at-bats of disagreeing with me and you, or agreeing with me and you on certain things, so that if there's truly a disagreement in the future on his end, he will speak up at a planning meeting because he's used to having to because of the pros and cons circle. That's really what we're getting at. So let's play the pros and cons circle real quick with this hypothetical. I will go. So, all right, I am on the board now. We're in character, okay? The pro is that I think fences look very pretty. The con is that there's only one entrance, and the people in the back of the community that used to be able to walk to the Publix no longer can. Those are my pros and cons. All right, Mr. Bill, what are your pros and cons? Let's say now Bill is the person that never speaks, and all of a sudden he's like, the pro is that it will show the community that we care about what they want us to do. The con is we're going to be broke because let's say Bill happens to have an accounting background or something like that, and we leverage his information. We're going to be broke because we only have, $20,000 to do this, and it's a $200,000 fence. Money is not cheap to borrow right now. And so I don't think it's a financially sound decision. And now, Autumn, give us a pro and a con. Sorry to put you on the spot.
The pro is that it will make people have a sense of security, having a fence around their property. The con is that we need to get our pool resurfaced and people can jump fences.
That's right. So the con is this isn't even going to solve the problem. But listen to what just happened here, okay? This was quick. This is let's go around the circle, do a pro and a con. I wish we had a Bill with us so that you could see exactly how it works. But, I think I played a good Bill. But guys, what does this do? It really gives every board member a seat at the table, that an actual, like a figurative seat. They obviously all have an actual seat. It gives them a voice, and it controls the ones who do not stop talking. It levels the playing field. It gives everyone an opportunity to be heard and give their opinions. Because the reality is, every single board member has something incredible to offer. It's just whether they are heard or not is when that incredible thing actually matters. Otherwise, yeah, sure, knowledge is power, but if knowledge just stays in your brain, that's not power. That's not helping your association. You need to actually vocalize the knowledge. And if you happen to have a person who's very vocal on your board, and you happen to be more docile or whatever, then chances are all of that knowledge is not going to be leveraged. This ability to engage in healthy conflict is incredibly important for your board. And the pros and cons circle is a very easy thing to implement, and you could do it immediately. You just have to decide as a board, hey guys, we heard this attorney give us a presentation about pros and cons circle. Can we just try it for the next 3 decisions and see how it works for us? And all of a sudden it becomes part of your processes. My amazing managers are usually the ones who facilitate it. Or the president. Oftentimes, I had one board president who actually said, I would like to facilitate it because I want to be the leader of this group. Great. So that is problem number 2 and solution number 2. Do I have any questions I need to answer before I move on to problem number 3 or solution number 3? I'm happy to maybe just finish and then we can do overarching questions. Okay, so the third and most important problem is the fact that boards, folks, I am not trying to offend any of you at all, but board members often do not have a mission statement for why they're on the board. They don't know what the purpose is. They maybe know it themselves, but there's no common purpose among the board members. When you lack a vision and you lack purpose and you don't know where you're going together, you're never going to get anywhere. That's just natural. So the lack of vision, the lack of purpose is the biggest problem. It's problem number 3, but it's the biggest problem on boards. Here's what I mean by that. And I promise I have interviewed hundreds of board members about this. And almost 100% of the time, the answers are the same. I ask them, why are you on the board? Why did you get on the board? I always get an answer because every one board member knows why they themselves are on the board. I get answers like, because I'm a finance major and I truly believe that my knowledge in finance would help my community. I get answers like, because I don't trust anyone. I get answers like, because I want to protect my biggest investment. I get answers like, because I want a beautiful community to live in, and so I want to be involved in those decisions. I get answers like, because I am not afraid to make hard decisions. I get answers all the time, but I never get answers from a board collectively. And I have asked a board together, or at least maybe, in trade shows or something, if I have 3 board members, I ask all 3 of them. They're all on the same board. Why are you guys on the board? Why are you on the board? And then one person would say, because I really feel like I'm good at making hard decisions, and I know being on the board is hard, and so I felt like that experience would be helpful. Inevitably, almost 100% of the time, when I ask each individual member in front of their other board members why they're on the board, I get the other board members going like, oh, that's interesting, right? What does that mean? That means these people who are running a company together don't even have a common purpose, a common vision. And that's normal. Why? Because remember problem number 1. Unfortunately, being on the board doesn't pay money. It's a volunteer position. It's above and beyond everything else you have to do in life, which makes it more of a revolving door. There's no continuity oftentimes. And so people just get in and deal with the fire in front of them. They don't take the time to be like, hey guys, what is our purpose? What is our value statement? What is our mission statement? They don't take the time to do that. Well, we've got to rectify that. If anybody here has ever had the pleasure of starting your own business or your own company, what's the most exciting thing of that entire journey? Even if you got to a point where you're taking your company public and you're making millions of dollars, oftentimes CEOs tell me things like, I remember the first few days when I tried to define what it is that I want my company to stand for. What is our mission? What is our why? Why are we doing this? And I try to stick to that. And I failed for a couple of years when I got away from that. And then I reminded myself, this is why I started the company, and went back to it, and profits started, increasing again. These are common stories we hear all the time, right? How is it then that we, as folks running a company together, have never discussed or even thought about the common purpose for why we are on the board? If we don't know where we're going, we're not going to go anywhere, right? I've said to people, I'm very directionally challenged. I always use Google to go places, because if I park my car on the right, chances are my gut's going to tell me to go left to find my car. I don't know why. It happens. So if I get in my car and I want to go up to Savannah, what is the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to put it in my navigation, right? I'm going to start from the goal and work backwards from there. Let my maps tell me, okay, if you want to get here, you got to go right, left, move up, north, south, whatever, and then you get there. I will never get in my car, start driving, and hope that I end up in Savannah, right? You have to define your goal. So that's the same thing as a purpose, folks. If you are on the board and all 5 of you, or all 3 of you, all 9 of you, whatever it is, are driving the ship together, that is your association, that is your company, how could you possibly sit there and start driving and have zero idea where you're going? Sure, we may have a vague perspective, like, yeah, we should be on the board to try to make the association the best it can. That is not specific enough. That's not a measurable goal. That's like when people say, I want to lose weight, and that's it. I want to become a millionaire, and that's it. Those are not measurable goals. You need a measurable goal so that you could reduce your goal into a plan and actually have action steps. But on boards, I always get answers from my individual board members about why they are on the board. They know where they want to go. They know what their goal is, but it's hardly ever consulted and synchronized with other board members. How do we rectify this problem? We rectify it by actually figuring out what our mission statement is, putting it in our bylaws, maybe in a charter, maybe in our standard operating procedure, italicize it, put it in quotes, and write board of directors underneath it. This way, it is every new person that comes on the board, here is our value statement as the board of directors of ABC Association. How do we accomplish this? I have given a very easy, quick solution to my managers or my presidents or my boards to implement, and that is this. You ask each board member to write down on a note card, those small ones or whatever. So grab 2 or 3 different ones, ask them to write 2 or 3 different reasons for why they are on the board, why they themselves are on the board, and make each reason be on a different note card. It's a fun exercise, okay? Let's say you are a 3-person board, make them do 3 reasons each. This way you have enough to work with. If you're a 9-person board, just make them do 1 reason each, okay? Their main reason for being on the board. You can use your judgment about what you want to do. Oftentimes I say, give them examples, because if you don't give them examples, you're inevitably going to have someone say, I am on the board because my next door neighbor, Linda, one time told me blah, 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 blah. That's not a mission statement, right? That is a story, and that is a venting session. Give them examples. Say, members of the board, we're going to do this exercise of identifying and defining our mission statement together. And here's why we should do it. You always want to give each other as board members a reason why you should go the extra mile, because people are a little bit busy in their lives, right? You should say, and here's why we should do this. We should do this because we have the luxury as this board to define our mission statement, and then everybody else who makes the board is going to have to follow in our footsteps. And so, you know, we should do this rather than the next board doing this. And then what you will say to them is, please go ahead and take a piece of paper and write down a reason for why you're on the board. Give them examples. Say, for example, because you want to protect your property values, because you want to increase security in the community. Let's say it's an insecure community or unsecured, because you don't trust people. Actually, don't say that. Let's keep it positive. So give them these examples, okay? And then they'll understand. And then they'll write it and have them give the note cards to one person, whether it's the manager or the president. By the way, the coolest thing is I have actually heard from board members who've done this, that at least 3 or 4 note cards end up being identical. And the reason why that makes me smile is, wow, so we have a common denominator that was never bothered to be exposed and capitalized on. They don't even know. Let's say, Autumn, you and I are on the board and both of us are concerned about security in our community. I may have joined because of my law enforcement background. You may have joined because your father owns a security company. If we never discussed that with each other, we didn't even know that we are allies, right? But now, if I say, because I want to increase security in my community, and I see that you said that too, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is great. We could talk more about this. We could actually move forward with this. Maybe you and I should be on, you know, in charge of that decision. It allows you to leverage each other's strengths and desires and define your mission statement. So then what happens is you remove the duplicate cards. You're left with maybe 5 cards. That's not a lot. That's 5 lines. 5 lines is a mission statement. And it could be the most beautiful thing. Have somebody turn it into a paragraph. All of a sudden, you now have in the beginning of your standard operating procedure, or on a sheet of paper that you choose to put in the wall in your conference room as an association that is laminated or framed or whatever you want to do. Something that goes like this. We at ABC Association Incorporated, as the board of directors of ABC Association Incorporated, believe that our community should be beautiful and safe. We strive to protect our property values collectively. We strive to ensure that every member of the community feels important and heard in association meetings. And we vow to keep our amenities maintained and useful for everyone to enjoy during the summer or all 12 months long. Whatever it is that you guys come up with collectively, okay, I just kind of came up with that on the spot. Turn it into an actual paragraph. Italicize it, put it in quotes, put underneath the board of directors of ABC Association Incorporated. And then when somebody leaves the board and somebody new comes on the board, they come on the board knowing there is a defined mission statement in this association. And you know what? It's not necessarily written in stone. So if the board says, you know what, we should modify this. We now have a very secured community because Deanna and Autumn both made it on the board and they cared so much about security. We haven't had a burglary or anything in years. So we should modify this and change it. Sure, go ahead. But you should still, let's go back to the metaphor I was trying to paint earlier. You still should know where you're going together as a board. Otherwise, you're getting nowhere. The best part about this third solution is actually that when there are arguments, you can go back to your mission statement and say, guys, here's our mission statement. Here are the 5 things we need to accomplish in the best interest of the association. Always the 5 overarching things. Which of these values is this argument trying to effectuate? No, none of them? Then let's nip it in the behind and move on. That's what it can do. So instead of arguing about pointless things, because that's one of the things I hear from board members a lot when I teach about board dynamics, they tell me, for whatever reason, we go down this rabbit hole that has nothing to do with anything. And then it wastes a lot of time. And then everybody comes out frustrated. How can we politely say to people, we're going down a rabbit hole that is irrelevant? Well, you can't if you don't have a defined purpose for why you're on the board, because that means you don't have a defined purpose for why you're meeting. But if you do, you can say, hey, folks, we are now arguing about politics and religion or whatever, and we've gone down a rabbit hole about this. Which of these things that are geared towards the best interest of the association, the company which we are running, is this argument trying to effectuate? And I guarantee you somebody's going to be like, well, it's not really, we just kind of, okay, well, we are in the C-suite to run this company. And so although this argument or conversation may be important, we think it should be done outside of this forum. So let's move on. You have to define what you stand for as a board. It makes life more exciting as a board member, because then you can buy in to the mission statement of why you're on the board. So there is an exercise that, today I talked about 3 problems, but there's actually a study done about board dynamics, and they define 5 different dysfunctions of the board. 3 of the ones I already defined, and then the other 2, they call them lack of accountability. I believe, lack of accountability and lack of commitment. The reason I didn't address those is because those are very intuitive. We know that if somebody doesn't have accountability, we need to step up our accountability systems and features and these types of things. And there's really it's not rocket science. It is a dysfunction on the board that needs to be addressed, but it's still something that needs to be addressed. And so there's an exercise that I'm going to share with Autumn and Castle Group, and that exercise will be given to all of you. I'm just going to give you a glimpse of it. It looks like this, and basically it is a board assessment. And so the way that it works is each of you will take this sheet of paper. We don't need to do it here. We can do it, you could do it in your own time, and fill this out. And the way you want to fill it out is you look up here, 1 is rarely, 2 is sometimes, 3 is usually, and then go ahead and fill this out. So for example, board members are passionate and unguarded in their discussion of issues. Is that rarely? Is that usually? Is that sometimes? Go ahead and fill this out, okay? And then you scroll down here to the key. These are the 5 dysfunctions that really I summarized in the 3 different problems, like fear of conflict, for example. Inattention to results is really a lack of vision. It's just a different phrase for it, okay? Absence of trust actually comes from the fact that we come from different walks of life and start out in debt without a common denominator. They're just different phrases because of the different studies. So what I recommend you do is you then take all of your scores here, you add them up based on what this is saying, and then this will tell you if you scored an 8 or a 9, this dysfunction is probably not a problem. If you scored a 3 to 5, this dysfunction is probably a big problem. The nice thing about this is it's almost like going to the doctor, right? You can't just say everything hurts. If you do, they're going to start touching you places and see where you scream. And so if you have 5 dysfunctions, you do this exercise and you narrow it down to 2, you can collectively as a board be like, okay, these are the 2 areas where we need the most work. We can work on it. I find that this exercise is very helpful to do on your own as a board member, because it's kind of long, and sometimes people check out if they do it together as a board, because then they're like, I don't really want to notice a meeting in front of the whole community where we're sitting there doing exercises. And I can understand that. It's not as practical. So I recommend doing it on your own and then figuring out what you believe your dysfunctions are on your board based on this exercise and assessment. And then maybe if you're, walking your dog and you see another board member, you can share results. Like, did you feel like we have an absence of trust? And if everyone's like, yeah, that's where we scored the lowest, then wow, you now identified a dysfunction on your board that you may need to work on. So I will be sure to send this exercise to Autumn. And I know that we're running out of time here, so I'll stop talking.
That's okay. I mean, we've had lots of good comments about this is great, and they want to know if this form is going to be sent email.
If this what? Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah. The form will be emailed to everybody who, I know you guys are collecting from your side on Castle emails of all the attendees. So yes, it will be sent to the email.
That's perfect. Let me see. It looks like a common denominator is just having a bullies on your board. And I think you kind of covered how to deal with that, but that was a main concern, looks like, throughout.
Yeah. So, yeah. And you know what? This is, I was the hypothetical bully that we played earlier. Honestly, the pros and cons circle really does tame that because I've actually, I had one board that told me that they implemented the pros and cons circle not just right before a decision. So my recommendation was do it right before the decision, but they actually told me that they did it more like a jury deliberation style, which I thought was brilliant. So if you guys have ever been on a jury, oftentimes, this is not a rule, but oftentimes jurors instinctively, as soon as they go in the deliberation room, somebody will inevitably say, do we even need to deliberate, or should we just go around and take a vote now and see where everyone stands? And a lot of times everybody says, oh yeah, we all believe this person is guilty or not guilty. And then they don't even deliberate. And so one of my boards told me that they implemented the pros and cons circle earlier and more regularly in the middle of the debate to try to tame the bully or the vocal person. And so, for example, let's say it's about the fence again. You can be like, all right, guys, can we just do a quick pro and con before we even start talking about whether this is important, just to see where everyone else is? And if you do that in the beginning, then I think it regulates the people that tend to speak up a lot more, and it elevates the people that tend to speak up less, and maybe it neutralizes it better. I mean, that's just an idea, but if there are harder issues or something particularly complicated, I also make myself available, by the way, to any board or any person that listens to any of my classes to give me a call after, and we could talk about your specific situation, and I'd be happy to help. Perfect.
Well, we just want to thank you for presenting for us today. I think this was such a valuable class. I love effective communication. It's one of my favorite things. And I know how hard it is in some circumstances. So we just want to thank you very much for presenting for us.
Okay, of course. You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you all for attending. And this is the conclusion.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome. Bye.